Hello, friends of Solidarity. How have you been enjoying this season so far? I am personally very enthusiastic about the conversations we have had about solidarity, from social engagement to youth, as well as money and food. It feels like we are amplifying a network of solidarity between different corners of Europe. Let me take this opportunity to ask you to help us in this work of getting Europe talking about solidarity. Could you share the podcast with your network? You can also leave comments, send us questions you would like our guests to answer, and reach out to suggest future guests. Today, we have two guests who will help us untangle our thoughts around humanitarian solidarity. Byrczek and Costil. Throughout the years, working as coordinator for volunteering projects, Aga has become an expert in intercultural communication. It is not surprising that she lives and works in Lorca, a city known for its diversity. Loan is a young communication officer for Clowns Without Borders France. She has volunteered for different organizations and projects, which gives her perspective on her current position. Aga loves writing. She wrote an article for the Talking Solidarity series that takes the shape of a toolkit addressed to project managers and organizations that coordinate international volunteering projects. Loan loves traveling, which is often part of the work that Clowns Without Borders does. She is observing the current shifting process happening at Clowns Without Borders France. From being an artistic and humanitarian organization to an international and artistic solidarity organization. With both of them, we are going to explore what makes international solidarity sustainable and responsible. Hola, Aga. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Aga Byrczek. The full name is Agnieszka, but only my mom is calling me like this when she's mad on me, so I prefer simply Aga. I work in the youth field for about 20 years already, doing different stuff, working with volunteers, trainings, writing projects, coordinating them, writing publications, so quite a variety of things. And describing me personally, I'm female, pronouns she, her. I have a bit blonde, a bit gray hair already. I am a fat person, and it's very hard to describe myself because my physics is permanently changing recently. And apart from the appearance, I really like to call myself or consider myself a strong, independent, and helpful person, full of energy.
Thanks for the description, Aga. Hello, Loan. Can I also ask you to introduce yourself?
So my name is Loan Costil. I'm 25 and I live in Paris, in France. And I'm currently working for Clowns Without Borders France as a communication officer.
And what can you tell me about yourself that would help the listeners picture you?
I'm Vietnamese, so it can give you some clues to picture me physically. And in terms of personality, I'm what we can call an introvert, extrovert. Like I love to go out and meet people, but I love also stay home alone with a book.
All right, Aga and Loan. It is a pleasure to meet you both. Aga has been living in Lorca, in Spain, for 12 years. Lorca is in the south of Spain and has a reputation for being a very diverse city with more than 108 different nationalities living there. It is when she moved there that she realized how diversity and inclusion are key ingredients for more solidarity.
I think that there was kind of big change when I moved to Lorca 12 years ago. It was the moment where actually I experienced and learned much more about diversity, much more about my own prejudices that I have. I had this kind of feeling that this is actually what it's worth standing for. And if you want, I can give you some examples what has happened. I remember when a colleague of mine came to visit me and we were walking around, and I saw a friend of mine who was from Ecuador, and of course we stopped, we kissed twice in the cheek as everyone is doing here, and a few words, and going farther. Then there was a person on the wheelchair that as well was a person that you meet in the bar, and you chat because you know this person, and so on and so forth. And then later on, this colleague of mine, when we sat down for a coffee, she was actually reflecting and telling me, how come it's possible that you know so many diverse people? And for me, it was the realization that it is normal because the people simply are visible on the streets.
Aga tells me that she started realizing that for us to be able to internalize, normalize maybe, diversity and different needs and experiences, we need to have access to different kinds of people.
And this was the moment that I really decided that I want to stand for the diversity.
Loan lives in Paris, not too far from Chloe, who was a guest in the first episode of this season, but in a very different type of neighborhood.
Well, I live in the Marais in Paris, so it's like an historic neighborhood. It's a lot touristic now, and yeah, we can meet a lot of people from different places in the world, so it's cool.
Before working for Clowns Without Borders France, Loan volunteered for an organization called CART ONG.
Yes, I volunteered for CART ONG. It's a French NGO working for humanitarian people, and it's specialized in information management and mapping. So I had to create maps for two organizations in France named Action Against Hunger and Solinum. And so basically the maps showed where people can find water points, sanitary facilities, food distributions, shelters, some places like this. And they were used during food distribution to help homeless people to know where they can find the stuff they needed because it was during the quarantine.
Now that we know a little about you, Loan and Aga, let's hear their take on solidarity. Loan, what is the best real-life example of solidarity that you experienced yourself?
Yes, I have a story coming into my mind. So actually, I was riding a scooter in Laos with a friend, and we almost had been crushed by a truck. So instead of being crushed, we ended up in a ditch full of waste and garbage, and it saved us, obviously. But we were not able to go back to the road because we were just the two of us, and the scooter was heavy. So luckily, some people turned around and helped us with the scooter, and we managed to understand each other and to work together, even if we didn't speak the same language or didn't know each other. And I think it kind of illustrates what solidarity is because people will help each other without regarding um, their conditions or expecting anything in exchange.
Thank you, Loan. Funny how this one is so close to the story shared by Zahid in previous episode, a story involving a scooter accident and language barriers with a happy ending. And you, Aga, do you have a real-life story to share?
Unfortunately, yes. Few years ago, I was going through the cancer treatment, and I was going through the cancer treatment here in Spain, having all my biological family in Poland. Well, it's not a very easy experience, let's say, and I have realized that I have so much support from people around me. that I never felt alone, that I had support for all my medical appointments, and it was really beautiful. And it really created very, very deep relationships with other people.
Then Aga tells us that for her, solidarity often comes in the form of small acts of kindness.
It's kind of this everyday action, even the very small ones. I don't know, like smiling to the person on the street, or saying thank you, or calling your friend just to ask how they are and to be sure that you are taking care of the people around you. And definitely, I hope I showed solidarity in several different ways. And what is meaningful for me are all the small actions that you are doing on the local level. And doesn't matter if you work or not, there is always something that you can do.
Aga, you are a question ahead. You just gave your definition of solidarity. Loan, what would be yours?
Well, I worked on it. And, well, I'm not going to give a scientific definition of what solidarity is, but more one based on my previous experiences. So I feel like solidarity is the way that people help, support, and stand for each other, regardless of where they come from or their opinions, their culture, etc. And it's also when people share resources, supplies, practices, or whatever around the world without expecting something in return.
Thank you so much, both of you, for giving us your take on solidarity. I keep being impressed by hearing so many different definitions of solidarity. It reminds me the very first Europe Talk Solidarity episode about the forethought study on solidarity. Since 2022, the European Solidarity Corps, that allows young people to volunteer in an organization in another country, also includes projects and NGOs outside of Europe, especially the Global South. This new humanitarian direction of the course was the reason for a new series of articles of the Talking Solidarity series. Aga, I would like to hear from you about the article you contributed. You wrote a toolkit and listed some golden rules to respect when preparing volunteers before they go abroad to work in a project in another country. What led you to write that article?
To be honest, my article has been written a few years ago. I mean, at least some part of the article. And it was the way for me to reflect on the different things and issues that were happening. Normally, I use the method of writing for me to reflect. For example, if I have to prepare myself for the training on some specific topic, then I will just sit down first and write some article so I can process all the information. And since I was working a lot with the EVS volunteers going and coming from the Global South to Europe and other way around, and working with the different organizations who were as well preparing volunteers, it was this kind of moment that I just was sitting in front of my computer and I had this kind of feeling and need to really write down some of the tips that I can give to all my partners in terms of sending, hosting, preparation. So when the SALTO made the call for new contributions, I went to my blog just to check what I have written that time. I thought that it's still meaningful and I thought it still makes a lot of sense. The previous article was mainly focused on the concrete tips. There was nothing about the power relations. There was nothing about the privileges and so on and so forth. So the article that I wrote for SALTO, it's much more elaborated, let's say. But yeah, I simply wanted to share my experience.
Can you elaborate about the power relations you are talking about?
So as I said, for me, the solidarity is very much related to the power relations. The article was very practical and was really focused on the volunteering with the perspective of the Global South. As well, I was writing a lot in the article about the concept of the power relations and privilege. And definitely, I focused on the stories from the volunteering projects. But on the other hand side, those things are our everyday life because we have power relations in all aspects of our lives. And sometimes we have more privileges, sometimes we have less. The things are changing permanently. And it's very important to be able to recognize what kind of privileges I have. I mean, I cannot lose my privilege of being white person. It's impossible. But what I can do is I can reflect, okay, I'm conscious that I have this kind of privilege. And I'm conscious what I can do with this privilege.
In this season, I'm really reflecting a lot on the importance of recognizing our privilege when it comes to being solidarity with others. Thanks for adding your perspective to that, Aga. Loan, can you share with us what Clowns Without Borders is?
So, Clowns Without Borders France is an international and artistic solidarity organization that defends access to live entertainment and to have access to shows as a fundamental right. So we perform for children, families and people, so victims of humanitarian crises, exiled people, refugees, people in extreme poverty or in prisons. And in France and around the world, professional artists perform shows and artistic workshops to share laughter and to wonder and to have some kind of imaginary interlude to break from the daily routine.
Clowns Without Borders was created in 1993 by Spanish clown Tortel Poltrona, who was invited to perform for refugees in a camp in Croatia during the ex-Yugoslavia conflict. At that time, realizing how laughter was a basic human right and was more than necessary in conflict areas, he encouraged French clown Antoine Morel to create the same structure in France. The movement spread to other countries, and the Federation Clowns Without Borders International is today made of 15 chapters around the world. Clowns are volunteers. How many of them are volunteers for the French Association?
Since the beginning of the association, I think that's a little bit more than 400 volunteered. And this year, I think it was 45 in 2021. And if you want to picture it, for one project abroad, we have 5 artists going.
What are the main conditions for the association to do such projects abroad?
Well, the main conditions is that we built our project in collaborations with local partners. So we don't decide to go in a country like this because we have the possibility or the power to do it. It's always on a need expressed locally. So we partner with artist collectives, local NGOs and associations, and we also are involved with the French institutes and the embassy. So to build the projects, we have necessarily weeks or months of exchange between the partners and the artists that will live on the projects to define the activities according to the local needs, the context, and just to act there without harming anyone.
Loan, you do some preparation work with the artists before they begin to work on a project, be it abroad or in France. What does the preparation involve?
When it's possible, we go to the sites where the project will be built to better understand the context. So in France, it's possible, but abroad, it's a bit difficult. But before deployment, the volunteer team will meet virtually several times with the local partners. And we also organize ourselves a preparation day at the association's headquarters. And this allows us to explain more of the context, the latest information we have, the securities, because sometimes we are going to places with yes, security issues. And so we can review everything going on there.
Aga, what kind of challenges did you identify throughout the years preparing volunteers before they go to a foreign country?
I have identified a lot of challenges, a lot. I think that one of the biggest challenge is that volunteers, before going to the project, they want to know all, and they are kind of expecting you to provide all the information. Why you didn't tell me that in Thailand you should not speak about the monarchy? Or why you didn't tell me that I need to take a lot of t-shirts with the longer sleeve because it's not really accepted? Or in some places you cannot wear shoes. There's a lot of small things, and what I try to pass to the volunteers as well, that it's their responsibility to take care of their own lives and as well to do some research and to do some preparation. Definitely, we are doing a lot of preparation, but I'm not able to know all the cultural aspects of all the countries in the world. It's impossible. So if we are talking about the challenges, definitely this is one of them. The other challenge that I was as well mentioning in the article, it's sometimes the motivation. And in the article, I was writing about this kind of motivation that volunteers have to save the world.
Aga explains that she admires the energy young people have for wanting to change the world, but how she also sees a dangerous side of that, because she has observed how many times young people go to the global south wanting to contribute, but only being able to see their own perspective.
They are always comparing it to what they have learned and how they have learned to do things. There were several times that we had complaints from the organizations that after 1 month, basically, they wanted to change how the whole organization works because they thought that it's contributing when they didn't know exactly what is the local reality. They didn't know still how the organization works, and so on and so forth. So if we are talking about the motivation, it's for me very important in terms of the preparation to discuss those issues, because it's very beautiful if we want to contribute and if we want to help, but as well it's very, very important to know what is the local reality, and that we are going to volunteer. It doesn't mean that the people who are there with us, they are less worthy or less knowledgeable.
Lowen, can you comment on that related to your work context?
Well, at the beginning, Clowns Without Borders went on missions because they had the means and powers to go to countries requiring these emergency actions, and they were part of what we call the Without Borders movement. And today, the projects are created by or with the people concerned and built with local partners. So we have like a turnover, and it's linked with the turnover in the staff team and also in the board. I think it's the younger generation who join Clowns Without Borders that help us to like deconstruct the way humanitarian used to work. So we started quite recently to question the vocabulary. It's a long process. So in September, we voted with the board members a new presentation for Clan Without Borders. And from the artistic and humanitarian organization, we are now going to be an international and artistic solidarity organization. And we are also trying to use the words projects, actions, interventions, rather than the word mission, because it has a connotation with the colonialism and also white savior wants to save the world, etc. So yeah, we are also thinking on how to reduce our impacts on the environment, everything is in progress, and we are trying to make change step by step.
Loan, I am also interested to know about the ways Clowns Without Borders ensures the projects become more and more environmentally friendly. How do you do that?
Working with local actors such as artists and associations help us to ensure this sustainability, because we don't want to go there every year. No, it's not our purpose. We want to go there like maybe during 2 or 3 years, and then they can pursue the project, the shows, without the French artists being involved.
Loan shared a precise example.
So we went for the first time in Ecuador in 2021 because a local collective of artists, Humor y Vida, asked us to come to help them to create giant puppets. So French artists went there to give like a training to create these giant puppets. And this was during the first year. And in 2022, we went back not to create the giant puppets, but to help them to include the giant puppets in their shows, like how to move it and everything. And so this part has been done as well, so we don't have to go back there anymore.
That's such an interesting shift from a form of humanitarian aid that places the receiving group in an inferior position towards the ones bringing means, talents, and knowledge. Whereas now you are co creating the projects together with the core objective of building capacity locally and not being needed anymore. Aga, going back to the savior complex you sometimes identify in young volunteers' motivations, what would be your strategy to reduce the possible biases this creates?
For me, it's important to have the very honest conversations with the volunteers and to really go to some kind of unconscious stereotypes and unconscious thoughts that we have somewhere deep in our heads, or it's because how we have learned or how we have done the things in our everyday life, and discuss it. Basically, my pre-departure trainings, I'm trying to do it 1 or 2 full days as the group of all the volunteers who are living in the same time. So as well, it's very nice because there is always different perspectives. So as well, it's not only me who is supporting the process of learning, but it's the whole group who is contributing. Then I'm trying always to share some very concrete examples.
Aga told me that she often shares examples from her personal experience. For instance, she often tells the future volunteers about that time when she went to India with a group of European volunteers and felt very controlled by the hosting organization. She couldn't see why the host organization was controlling their every move. Years later, she understood that when she went to India, she didn't understand the dangers and the responsibility the hosting organization had. She also only later learned that some information needed a translator between the hosting organization and the volunteers.
We are talking about a very huge, quite often intercultural gap. And I'm not really using the word mediator, I'm using the word translator. And although we are maybe using the same language, sometimes you really need to be in this position to talk to one part, talk to other part, and then realize how to pass the information in which way that it would be understood properly by everybody.
So, from a project coordinator, your role changes and you become a translator. Loan, can we say that in your context, art becomes a common language and maybe one that helps fostering more solidarity?
Yes, I do believe art is a tool for more solidarity, as it's a universal language. So, for example, through Clowns Without Borders activities, we gather people together, will not interact on a daily basis. Like, for example, in India, the show was performed in front of different castes, including the Dalits. And the Dalits are men, women, and children, also called the untouchables, I think. and they are persecuted and victims of discrimination in India. So with the show, we can gather all the people together. And from my point of view, I think laughing and experiencing these emotions together bring people also together.
How about we keep this as the conclusion of this episode? Many thanks, Aga and Loan, for this very insightful conversation about humanitarian solidarity, the challenges that go with it, and the possible solutions we can create to face those challenges.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. We are already mid-season. Can you believe it? It seems like solidarity is an inextinguishable topic, and we can always find new aspects of it to explore. For the next episode, we invited Barbara Byrczek, professor of political science at the University of Vienna, with whom we will focus on health and solidarity. This is a podcast of SALTO European Solidarity Corps Research Center, produced by Instituto NOW. For more information and resources on solidarity and the course, go to talkingsolidarity.eu. The theme song Solidarity Unifies Us is composed and sung by Paula Gehrs. The episode was mixed by Simone Aftalion and hosted by Diogo Pires. The artwork was created by Ina Gouveia.
Our love to share, our love to care, solidarity, darity, darity.